28 years in psychiatric medicine. I believe in diagnostic criteria and pharmacological intervention. I believe the DSM is a flawed but functional framework for categorizing human suffering. I believe that with my whole career. And I'm sitting here, 2 years into retirement, talking into a recorder in my study in Portland because Carla Rice called me on a Tuesday and I was stupid enough to answer. Carla and I trained together at OHSU in the late 80s. She went clinical, I went forensic. Different tracks, but the same language. When she calls, it's professional. She doesn't do small talk, never has. She said she had a statistical anomaly at Blackwell State. She wanted a second opinion. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I drove 3 hours east through the Cascades on a morning so gray the sky looked like a hospital ceiling. Blackwell State Hospital sits on 40 acres of nothing in eastern Oregon. High desert, sagebrush, a 2-lane highway that doesn't go anywhere people want to go. The facility is a cluster of flat-roofed concrete buildings from the 1960s connected by covered walkways that all look the same. Chain-link perimeter with razor wire. I signed in at the front desk. Photo ID, badge, pat down. I'd been through that process 1,000 times at 100 different facilities, and it never changed. The buzzer, the magnetic lock, the click that means you're inside, and the door behind you is not opening until someone decides it should. Carla met me at the nurses' station on Ward 7, Building 7. The ward smelled the way every long-term psychiatric ward smells. Industrial cleaner, cafeteria food, and something underneath that nobody ever names. The plexiglass at the station was scratched from decades of patients pressing their hands against it. She didn't waste time. She put 6 charts on the table, 6 patients, 6 different diagnoses, 1 schizophrenia paranoid type, 1 bipolar 1 with psychotic features, 1 schizoaffective disorder, 1 major depressive disorder with catatonic features, 2 unspecified psychotic disorders, ages 23 to 61, 3 men, 3 women. Admitted over a span of 14 months. No overlap in admission dates, no shared group therapy, no common treatment team. The facility rotated attending psychiatrists quarterly. These patients had no clinical reason to share anything, but they did. Each one, within 2 to 8 weeks of admission to Ward 7, developed the same auditory hallucination. A woman's voice, calm, mid-register, dictating medication orders. I need to be specific here because specificity matters. These weren't vague voices saying, "Take your medicine." Each patient described independently in separate interviews conducted by different clinicians, a female voice, estimated age mid-50s, with what one patient called a supervisor's tone, like she's doing rounds. The voice dictated precise medication names and dosages. Chlorpromazine, 100 milligrams 3 times daily. Thioridazine, 50 milligrams twice daily. Perfenazine, 8 milligrams at bedtime. These are first-generation antipsychotics. Chlorpromazine hasn't been a first-line treatment in decades. Thioridazine was withdrawn from the U.S. market in 2005 due to cardiac risk. These aren't medications a layperson pulls out of the air. I asked Carla about folie à deux, shared psychotic disorder. She gave me a look. I deserved it. Folie à deux requires prolonged close contact between a primary and secondary case. These patients were admitted months apart. 3 of them never overlapped on the ward at all. This wasn't induced delusional disorder. This wasn't mass hysteria. This was 6 unrelated people hearing the same specific, pharmacologically accurate voice in the same building. I told her I wanted to see the nursing notes. She'd already prepared them. 12 weeks of documentation, flagged and tabbed. I sat in the conference room and read for 2 hours. Every detail was consistent. The voice came at night, usually between 2 and 3 in the morning. Patients reported it as coming from inside the walls, not from a speaker, not from another room, from inside the wall material itself, as if the concrete were speaking. Then Carla showed me the transcriptions. Each patient had at some point written down the medication orders the voice was dictating. She'd collected all 6 transcriptions. She laid them out on the conference table in chronological order, left to right. I looked at them for a long time. The handwriting was identical. Not similar, not consistent with, identical. The same letter formation, the same slant, the same pressure variation. 6 different people, 6 different brains, 6 different sets of motor neurons, writing in the same hand. I put my pen down. I don't remember deciding to put it down. My hand just stopped. I asked Carla whose handwriting this was. She said no one on staff recognized it. The next morning I interviewed 3 of the 6 patients. Standard clinical interviews, semi-structured, open-ended, designed to let the patient lead. I've done thousands of these. You sit across from someone, you listen, you watch their eyes and hands, and you build a clinical picture. Patient number 1, Sandra Koenig, 53, schizophrenia, paranoid type. Flat affect, minimal eye contact, speech latency about 3 seconds. She described the voice matter-of-factly. She reads the medications like a list every night. I asked if the voice frightened her. Sandra looked at me with an expression I've spent 2 years trying to forget, not fear. Patience, like I was a student who hadn't done the reading. She said, "The medications, they're not for me." Patient number 4, James Okafor, 26, unspecified psychotic disorder. Agitated, tangential speech, poor concentration. But when I asked about the voice, he became still, like a different person sat down. He described it identically, female, mid-50s, clinical tone. Then he said the voice was reading from a specific chart. She says the patient's initials before each order, every time. I asked what initials. He said 2 letters, starts with A, maybe. I didn't write that down. My first name is Arthur, my last name is Linden. I told myself that was a coincidence. Patient number 3, Marcus Webb, 34, schizoaffective disorder. Marcus was the most articulate. College educated, diagnosed at 22, had been on and off lithium for 12 years. He understood his illness. He understood the difference between his symptoms and this. "Dr. Linden," he said. My name was on my badge, so that was nothing. "This isn't a hallucination. I know what my hallucinations sound like. They're messy, disorganized. This comes from the building, and it's dictating." He showed me his transcription, same handwriting. Then he held up his left hand. I'm left-handed, my entire life. This was written with my right. He turned his right hand over, a writer's callus on his middle finger, on a hand he said he'd never used to write. I went to the basement. Every state facility has an archive. Blackwell's was in the basement of Building 7. I pulled records by building and year, working backward. What I found was worse than shared hallucination. In 1971, a research psychiatrist named Dr. Helen Voss conducted a clinical trial in Building 7. Pharmacological compliance through directed auditory conditioning. That title. You can smell the era. Voss installed speakers in the ventilation system and played recorded medication instructions to patients during sleep. The theory was auditory repetition would improve compliance. The medications were experimental first-generation antipsychotic combinations at doses that would make a modern pharmacologist leave the room. 3 patients died, cardiac arrhythmia, all within 6 weeks. The study was terminated. Voss lost her license in 1972, records sealed. Her protocol: chlorpromazine 100 milligrams 3 times daily, thioridazine 50 milligrams twice daily, perfenazine 8 milligrams at bedtime. The exact medications every current patient was transcribing. I held Voss's handwritten notes next to the patient's transcriptions. Same letter formation, same slant, same idiosyncratic lowercase g with the tail that loops twice. 6 patients in 2014, writing in the hand of a doctor from 1971. I asked Carla to check on Helen Voss. She made calls. Voss died in 1989, pancreatic cancer, cremated, no surviving family. That night, Carla offered me the on-call room in Building 7. I should have driven home, but I was a forensic psychiatrist with 26 years of experience, and I believed in diagnostic criteria, and I did not believe in buildings that remember. I woke at 2:14 a.m., not from a sound, from silence. Total silence. HVAC off, fluorescent hallway lights off, no patient movement, no footsteps, the kind of silence that has texture, that presses against your eardrums. Then I heard the voice, female, mid-50s, clinical tone. She was reading my medications, not the 1971 ones, mine. Trazodone, 50 milligrams at bedtime, lorazepam, 0.5 milligrams as needed. Medications my own doctor prescribed 8 weeks ago. Medications I never told Carla about. Then the voice paused and recommended replacements. Chlorpromazine, 100 milligrams 3 times daily. Thioridazine, 50 milligrams twice daily. The Voss protocol. I lay on that narrow bed and listened to a dead woman prescribe medication for symptoms she should not have known I had. The voice stopped at 2:31 a.m. I know because I was staring at my phone. 17 minutes. I lay there for another hour, listening to nothing, before I turned on the light. My hands were on top of the blanket. The right one was holding a pen, the ballpoint I'd left on the bedside table. Next to the bed, on the notepad the hospital provides for on-call staff, I had written something. 3 lines. In handwriting that was not mine. I need to describe this carefully. My handwriting is small, compressed, left-leaning, the product of 30 years of cramming clinical observations into chart margins. What was on that notepad was round, upright, and deliberate, with that same double-looped G. Helen Voss's hand, written by my hand, which I did not feel move. It read, "Patient presents with insomnia, hypervigilance, elevated cortisol, GF58. Recommend protocol initiation. A clinical assessment of me, written by me, in someone else's handwriting." I tore the page out. I did not sleep again. At 6 in the morning, I went back to the archive. Every record from Building 7, 1971 to present. I was no longer looking for the origin. I was looking for edges, boundaries. There were none. After Voss's license was revoked, the facility removed the speakers, reassigned the patients, sealed the records. Standard institutional response. Contain, document, forget. But the nursing notes from December 1972 showed 3 new patients on Ward 7 reporting auditory hallucinations. A woman's voice, medication orders, patients who had never been exposed to the speakers. 1973, 4 patients. 1974, 2. Every 12 to 18 months, someone on Ward 7 transcribed medication orders in Helen Voss's handwriting. The reports stopped in 1978, not because the hallucinations stopped. A memo from the clinical director instructed nursing staff to exclude shared delusional content from individual charts and log it in a general ward observation file. Those files continued through the 80s. The 90s, the 2000s. 43 years, same voice, same protocol, same handwriting. Patients who never met, never shared a diagnosis. Building 7 was not haunted. That is not a clinical term. Building 7 was still running the study, without speakers, without a researcher, without consent. I went to find patient number 6. Elaine Park, 41, admitted for major depressive episode with psychotic features. Discharged 2 weeks before my visit. Her chart noted auditory hallucinations resolved at discharge. Standard outcome, unremarkable. But in the patient belongings log there was an entry, envelope, sealed, labeled Dr. Linden. She left it at the nurse's station. For me, I was not assigned to her case. I had not visited Blackwell when she was admitted. The envelope was in a plastic bin in the administrative office. Inside, a single sheet of yellowed paper. A prescription pad printed with Blackwell State Hospital and a logo the facility stopped using in 1975. Helen Voss's handwriting. It read, Dr. Linden, MSE attached, GAF 54, Axis 1, adjustment disorder with anxiety, Axis 2, deferred, recommended mission to Ward 7 for observation and protocol initiation. You will find this note because you are always going to find this note. The study requires a psychiatrist. It always has. I put the note in my jacket pocket. I thanked Carla for her time. I said I'd send my consultation report by the end of the week. I drove 3 hours back to Portland and I never sent the report. That was 2 years ago. I'm telling you this now because last night I fell asleep at my desk. Right here, in this study, in my house in Portland, 90 miles from Blackwell. I woke up at 2:14 a.m. My right hand was holding a pen. On the legal pad next to this recorder, in handwriting I now recognize instantly, I had written a medication order. Chlorpromazine, 100 milligrams, 3 times daily. My name on the patient line. I got up. I walked through my house. I counted the doors. I've lived in this house for 11 years. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, kitchen, study, front and back entry. I know this house. There are 6 doors. I counted 7. I counted again. 7. I'm going to stop the recorder now. I don't think it matters whether I stop or not. The study doesn't need my participation. It doesn't need my consent.